Let's delve into the foundational period of American history, focusing on the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution from 1776 to 1789. This era marks a pivotal time when the newly independent American states sought to define their governance. First, the Articles of Confederation. This was the United States' initial attempt at a national government. However, it created a central authority with intentionally limited power. Why? The aim was to avoid the centralized control reminiscent of British rule. Under the Articles, the government could conduct foreign policy, borrow money, and make treaties. Yet it couldn't tax or regulate trade, which were significant limitations. The government had a unicameral Congress but lacked an executive branch or court system. Decisions required 9 out of 13 states to pass laws, and the amendments needed unanimous agreement from all states. These limitations underline the need for a more robust framework, leading to the drafting of the Constitution. In our next section, we will explore how individual states began crafting their own governments and the characteristics these new structures adopted. The American Revolution and the victory provided the colonies a chance to relook at their own internal governments, and they oftentimes created new governments in keeping with the times. To start, it's important to know that every state created a written plan or constitution which laid the groundwork for governance. A key feature was the separation of powers. This meant splitting government power among three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Another common aspect was property requirements for voting. This often meant that only landowners could vote, limiting participation. Many states also adopted a Bill of Rights, safeguarding basic freedoms like religion and trial by jury. This was crucial in ensuring individual liberties were protected. A notable example is the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, authored by Thomas Jefferson, emphasizing the importance of religious liberty. The government framework was rooted in republicanism, meaning that the power came from the people. However, it was a vibrant debate over what form republicanism should take. As we move forward, we'll see how these state level ideas influence the Articles of Confederation, the first national government. This government could conduct foreign policy, borrow money, and make treaties. However, it was designed with limited power. The central government was a unicameral Congress, meaning there was no executive branch or court system. This setup meant the government had no power to tax or regulate trade. Consider this. To pass any law, 9 out of 13 states needed to agree. And all states, regardless of size, had just one vote. To amend the articles, unanimity was required. All 13 states had to agree. These limitations highlighted significant challenges. As we move forward, we'll see how these issues influence the development of future governing documents. One of the great successes of the Articles of Confederation was the Northwest Ordinances. First, the Land Ordinance of 1784 laid the groundwork for how territories would evolve into states. This was a forward thinking move, ensuring that as populations grew, governance structures could adapt. Next, the Land Ordinance of 1785 introduced a systemic change to surveying and selling land in the Northwest, a region rich with potential. Notably, a section of land was dedicated to public education, underscoring the importance of learning in this new frontier. Lastly, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 formalized the process by which territories could join the Union as states. Significantly, it prohibited slavery in the Northwest Territory, setting a precedent for the future. This was a bold and progressive step at the time. These ordinances collectively shaped the growth of the nation, balancing expansion with the principles of governance and equality. Foreign policy problems. Looking at the weaknesses of this early government. Firstly, the British maintained forts in the West, despite having ceded these areas by treaty. This not only violated agreements, but also created tensions by disrupting trade and arming native groups. Next, America faced restrictions from Spain, which banned American shipping along the crucial Mississippi River in 1784. This affected trade routes and demonstrated our vulnerability. Goods were commonly shipped by ship. It was the most effective and cheap option. So, as colonists moved, as Americans moved west of the Appalachians, it was much too costly to ship over the Appalachian Mountains. So, the most effective means of farming and shipping your goods or getting goods was to ship it down the Ohio River to the Mississippi River, and then on down to New Orleans, and then out into the Gulf of Mexico into the Atlantic. However, the Spanish controlled New Orleans, and therefore it was a choke point that was creating a huge amount of issues because it was an economic necessity for Americans to ship along the Mississippi River. So this was a big deal for the time. France, on the other hand, was demanding repayment of loans given during the American Revolution. This financial pressure added to the economic strain. Additionally, without the protection of the British fleet, American shipping suffered at the hands of the Barbary pirates. The British had previously managed these threats through deals with the Barbary states, but now the US was on its own. They even had to deal with pirates. These foreign policy problems underscore the limitations of the Articles of Confederation and set the stage for the growing demand for a stronger central government. After the American Revolution, the nation faced a tough economic downturn, which deeply affected farmers. This resulted in Shays' Rebellion. Daniel Shay, a veteran and a farmer from Massachusetts, became a central figure during this difficult time. He led a group of impoverished farmers in a rebellion during 1786 and 1787. Their demands were clear. They wanted lower taxes, an end to foreclosures, the issuance of paper money, and the abolition of imprisonment for debt. Unfortunately, the government under the Articles of Confederation was too weak to effectively respond to this uprising. This inability highlighted a growing need for a stronger central government, which would soon lead to significant changes in the nation's governance. Shays' Rebellion thus became a catalyst for calls to strengthen the national government, setting the stage for the creation of a new governing framework. Let's explore the reasons behind this new government. Following the turmoil and challenges faced by the nation, there was a growing demand to address issues like international trade, finances, interstate commerce, foreign relations, and internal unrest. These were pressing concerns that required immediate attention. In 1786, the Annapolis Convention was convened with representatives from 5 states to discuss trade and commerce. This gathering highlighted the need for a more comprehensive approach, and it set the stage for the momentous Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia a year later. At the Constitutional Convention in 1787, 55 delegates gathered with the intent to revise the Articles of Confederation. However, they quickly realized that a mere revision would not suffice. Instead, they embarked on the ambitious task of crafting an entirely new and stronger central government. This decision marked a pivotal moment in American history. Let's now look at the compromises that emerged from this convention. These compromises shaped the legislative structure that we have today. Our first key point revolves around the debate over representation in Congress. James Madison introduced the Virginia Plan, which proposed a bicameral legislature with representation based on population size. This plan appealed to larger states as it would give them more influence. In contrast, smaller states favored the New Jersey Plan. This plan suggested a unicameral legislature with equal representation for each state, ensuring that smaller states had an equal voice. Finally, Roger Sherman presented the Great Compromise, a pivotal moment in our history. It established a bicameral legislature with the Senate giving 2 representatives per state, and the House of Representatives based on population. This balanced approach allowed both large and small states to agree on a fair representation system. These compromises laid the foundation for our current system, illustrating the importance of negotiation and balance in government. As we move forward, we'll see how these compromises also extended to another contentious issue like slavery. Looking at one of the most contentious debates at the Constitutional Convention, slavery. The question was, should slaves be counted in a state's population? Slave states argued yes, hoping to gain more representation in the House of Representatives, while free states opposed this, fearing that it would unfairly increase the power of slave states. This is one of the Three-Fifths Compromise is one of the most misunderstood out there. That the slave states were arguing, yes, that the slaves should be counted. Only those who owned property could vote. So slaves themselves could not vote. So slaves being represented in a state's population would only allow slave states to have more power as they would have more representation in Congress, in the House of Representatives. So this was a power play by slave states, by slave owners to have more control. Now, the result, the three-fifth compromise, slaves would be counted as three-fifths of a person for representation purposes. It was a compromise that allowed slaveholding states to gain more seats in Congress, despite the fact that slaves could not vote. Another key point, the slave trade was permitted to continue until 1808. In 1789, with 13 states and a population of 3.7 million, this compromise was significant. It set the ratio of representation at one representative for every 57,169 people. Now, that number has substantially changed to this day. These decisions provided the Southern states with more power, allowing them to maintain the institution of slavery longer. These compromises were pivotal yet deeply controversial, shaping the early political landscape of the United States. The debate over the ratification of the Constitution. On one side, we had the Federalists. They were strong supporters of the Constitution and advocated for a robust central government. Their belief was that such a structure was essential for the nation's stability and prosperity. Opposing them were the Anti Federalists. They were skeptical of a powerful central government and preferred stronger state rights. Their concerns were rooted in the fear of losing individual liberties under a centralized power. To sway public opinion, the Federalist Papers played a crucial role. These 85 essays, penned by James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay, were instrumental in persuading people to support the Constitution. A key factor in achieving ratification was the promise of a Bill of Rights. This was a significant compromise, ensuring that the protection of individual rights and explicitly limiting the powers of the federal government. It was a reassurance to many who feared the potential overreach of federal authority. Finally, in 1789, George Washington took office as the nation's first president, marking the beginning of a new era under the ratified Constitution. As we move forward, it's important to understand the foundation of our government and the key principles enshrined in the Constitution. First, the Constitution established popular sovereignty, the idea that power ultimately rests with the people. This was revolutionary at that time, emphasizing that authority arises from the consent of the governed. Next, we have the separation of powers among the three branches of government. This system ensures that no single branch becomes too powerful, promoting a balance that's crucial for democracy. Additionally, the Constitution delineated a division of power between the national and state governments. This is a principle known as federalism. This balance allows for a strong national framework while preserving state autonomy. Importantly, the Constitution becomes the supreme law of the land, ensuring that all laws and policies adhere to its principles. Lastly, the framers designed the Electoral College to elect presidents, not by direct popular vote, but through electors. This was intended to temper the influence of direct democracy and safeguard against potential mob rule. These foundational elements collectively aim to create a resilient and balanced government system that served the people's interest. This government exists to this day,